Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's explainer is a really special one. We're diving straight into the mechanics of generosity, specifically focusing on the lesson behind Sara's garden. We're going to look at how one tiny little input can create, well, massive, structural change, all through a seemingly simple story called The Empty Bowl. So let's just get right into it and see what we can uncover about the sheer power of a single action.
So here's a question for you. How on earth can a single bowl of soup feed an entire village? I mean, mathematically speaking, it sounds completely impossible, right? One bowl is exactly one serving. It stops one person's hunger for exactly one night. But as we'll see in the story we're exploring today, when you actually factor in human behavior, kindness doesn't just add up, it multiplies. That's the core mystery we're going to deconstruct today, step by step.
All right, let's start at the beginning. Section 1, an empty bowl.
So our story kicks off with a young girl named Sara who lived with her grandmother in pretty extreme poverty. We're talking living on the absolute margins here, zero safety net. But what is so brilliant about this is that their lack of resources didn't dictate their actions. In fact, they had very little food, but every evening they shared what they had. That tells us their generosity wasn't dependent on having some huge surplus. It was literally just baked into who they were. If you were hungry, you were welcome at their table, period.
Which brings us to the real catalyst of the whole thing, in Section 2, the midnight knock.
You know, every system needs a spark to ignite a reaction, right? And in this story, that spark shows up on a bitterly cold night when an old traveler knocks on their door, just asking for a meal. Now, this was the ultimate test. Why? Because Sara only had one bowl of soup left. Literally, just one. That single digit was their entire net worth in terms of food. Giving it away meant having absolutely nothing for themselves. Talk about extreme scarcity. And yet, Sara doesn't hesitate. She doesn't sit there and calculate the risk. She just gladly hands over that one solitary bowl, 100% of what she had, given away in an instant.
Now, the traveler didn't just eat and run. He smiled and said something that is really the foundational philosophy of this entire explainer. He said, "Kindness is never wasted." I really want you to lock that phrase in your memory. You see, in a world that's obsessed with strict resource management, giving away your absolute last bowl of soup looks like a total loss, doesn't it? It just looks like waste. But this quote completely reframes the act of giving. It tells us that kindness is basically an indestructible energy. It doesn't just disappear, it transforms.
And man, that transformation happens incredibly fast. Let's look at Section 3, Seeds of Kindness.
So the sun comes up the very next morning, and there is a massive shift in energy. Sara walks outside and finds this totally unexpected gift, a small pouch of vegetable seeds. And attached to it is a note that says, "Plant these with the same kindness you showed me." I mean, what a brilliant narrative bridge. The traveler didn't leave her a fresh bowl of hot soup, he didn't leave a bag of gold coins, he left her potential. The note directly connects the act of giving to the act of growing. It's asking Sara to take that exact same intention she used when she gave away her food and apply it directly to nurturing these seeds in the dirt.
Okay, let's track the timeline here, because the pacing is just absolutely critical to understanding the mechanics of this story. On the evening of day 1, we have the ultimate sacrifice, right? Sharing the last bowl. Boom, the very next morning, we have the introduction of potential, finding the seeds. But look at this final step. Within weeks, not years, not decades, just weeks, a beautiful garden grows. We're talking totally full of fresh vegetables and fruit. The rapid scaling from one single good deed to a literal abundance of physical resources is staggering when you really think about it.
But it doesn't just stop with Sara getting a nice personal garden. We are now entering Section 4, a village transformed.
This is where we see the true pivot from just a personal reward to sweeping macro-level community abundance. Look at this crazy contrast. On the left side, we've got Sara's starting state, exactly one bowl of soup left. On the right side, the ultimate outcome. No one in the village went hungry again. Like, how on earth do we bridge the gap between those two realities? How does one single bowl turn into zero hunger for an entire population?
Well, the secret sauce here is community collaboration. First off, Sara shared her new harvest with her neighbors. She didn't hoard all this new wealth. She applied the exact same principle she lived by when she was dead broke. Because she did that, the second thing happens, the whole village worked together. The entire culture of the town shifted. They got inspired. And finally, that unified effort meant they grew even more food. That one small act of kindness was basically a blueprint that inspired everybody else to change how they behaved. It was that collaborative community-wide effort that permanently solved their hunger problem.
So let's bring it all together. Here's Section 5, the lesson behind the garden.
All right, so why does all this matter to us today, and what's the actual structural takeaway? Let's totally deconstruct these mechanics of generosity to prove how micro-actions scale exponentially. Step 1 is the micro-action, sacrificing that one bowl of soup. Step 2 is the immediate return, getting the small pouch of seeds. Step 3 is the critical pivot, and this is huge, a shared harvest. If Sara had kept the veggies to herself, the whole chain breaks right there. But by sharing, she unlocks Step 4, an inspired hunger-free village. It's a literal step-by-step formula proving that community transformation always begins with one individual who's willing to take that first risk.
And that brings us to the core moral of our source text. A single act of kindness can feed many hearts. The logic here is just undeniable. Sure, the soup fed the traveler's stomach for one night, but the kindness that came with the soup, that fed the traveler's spirit, which then prompted the gift of seeds, which fed the neighbors, which inspired the whole village to feed themselves forever. The kindness was the actual nourishment that scaled up.
So, we're going to leave you with this final thought. A single act of kindness can feed many hearts. We've just walked through the exact blueprint of how a tiny, seemingly insignificant microaction can scale into this massive community transformation. You really don't need endless resources to get started. Sara proved that. You just need a willingness to share what little you do have. So, looking at the systems and the communities in your own life, what will you plan today? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I absolutely cannot wait to explore our next topic with you.